In 1971, a woman called Esther Vilar wrote a book called The Manipulated Man. And as you can probably guess by the title, it's about the ways in which women have manipulated men throughout history to the present day. In a chapter called Self-Conditioning, she wrote, "The ideal of any trainer would be to bring an animal to a level where it's capable of training itself. This is something which still has to be achieved. But man is not an animal, and there comes a point where he does continue his own training because he is much more intelligent than his female trainer. This will work only as long as he never forgets the purpose of his education and keeps both reward and punishment in mind at all times." The world of pop songs is one example of men's efforts at self-manipulation. The best example of self-conditioning, however, is to be found in the advertising industry. In advertising, man does not idealize women from any masochist tendency. It is purely a question of survival. Only his exploiters, women, have sufficient time and money to buy and consume all of his products. To supply the woman inhabiting his ranch house with purchasing power, he has no choice but to cultivate legions of other women who have as much satisfaction as his own wife in spending. They will then buy his goods and keep his wife in pocket money. This is the beginning of a vicious circle which turns faster and faster until he cannot keep up with it anymore and someone else has to take over. There is no getting off and running away. Market research institutes investigate what they like to call subliminal female stimuli. The conscious ones have long since been satisfied, and then sell their discoveries to manufacturers. The latter then hurry to fill these so-called gaps in the consumer market as if there were in fact such things. Or sometimes they work in reverse. The producer invents a new article in which he believes might appeal to women and then hires an advertising agency to create the necessary consumer interest, sometimes with success, sometimes without. The American craze for prefabricated houses, for example, has not caught on to a large extent in any European countries. Every few years, a wave of indignation sweeps over the male ranks as a result of this expensive fostering of the female craze for consumption. They have been blinded by the stereotyped image of woman as victim of male exploitation to such an extent that they don't realize that they themselves are in fact the sufferers. They maintain that women's naivety and their gullible, i.e. stupid natures are exploited by advertisers for the purpose of increasing sales. One day these men will get around to asking themselves who is really being exploited. Is it the creature whose innermost wishes are sought out, coddled, and fulfilled? Or is it he who, in his desire to retain the affections of woman, seeks out, coddles, and fulfills them? It has always been one of man's greatest aims in life to fulfill woman's innermost desires. In fact, to anticipate her every wish, as contemporary women's fiction still puts it. They have achieved their goal. There is practically no female desire left undiscovered, and probably very few which could not, if necessary, be fulfilled. The result is that women are getting increasingly more stupid, while men grow more and more intelligent. The gap between the sexes is widening constantly, making mutual understanding virtually impossible, but no one seems to notice. One of the basic principles of biology is that intelligence develops only in the face of competitive stimulation. Women, however, stand outside every competitive field. The glut of modern conveniences dulls their brains, reducing what little is left of their capacity for thought. Men, on the other hand, prodded by the need to create discomfort to open up new sources of income, has to exert himself more and more. Surrounded by this ever-increasing comfort, the female sex is changing for the worse. The concept of femininity used to be applied to a woman who had the ability to bear children. It was also applied to venality, the definition must be enlarged to include imbecility. If Marx is right and the word being determines the extent of men's being aware, the pill, for instance, would determine sexual mores, and the atom bomb would stalemate the ideologies of peace to the same extent the self-awareness of Western women whose situation in life has changed, improved, basically over the last 20 years, is now in a state of acute transformation. This metamorphosis, which can only result in the utter stultification of woman, is all the more dangerous because no one seems to have noticed it. And to add my own commentary here, I think what's even worse is when the people who have noticed it talk about it, they tend to get code names like, you're sexist, you hate women, or whatever. When in some cases the truth is you're just pointing out the ways in which women have been conditioned. Anyway, she continues on to write, "A woman's image is no longer created by women, but by advertising, that is, by men. And if anyone even starts to doubt the truth of woman's value, then there are 100 snappy advertising slogans ready at hand to disprove such a thought. Advertising says that woman is witty, intelligent, creative, imaginative, warm-hearted, practical, and capable. Smiling sweetly with all the airs of a goddess, she dispenses the latest discovery in instant drinks to her grateful brood. Her husband's eyes follow her adoringly as she serves up a new pre-cooked meal, which is so much more to his taste. Or maybe she hands him a Turkish towel which is even softer than usual, the result of a new rinse. This image of woman created by man in order to sell his goods is repeated incessantly with the help of mass media throughout the Western Hemisphere, and each day it is being reinforced. How could anyone dare to admit even to himself that in reality women are unimaginative, stupid, and insensitive? It would obviously be too much to expect of women, and that is an admission men cannot afford. Now, it's important to note here that she is not talking about all women, obviously, but unfortunately she is talking about the majority of women. Anyway, she continues to write, "Woman buys, man sells, but one does not convince a customer by saying, 'It's good, you've got to buy it.' Instead, we say, 'You're marvelous, you're the best. Why should you make do with anything less? You've earned your comfort, you're entitled to it.' So, on top of everything else, man has to flatter woman because he needs her as a customer. It is striking that the trick men are using here appears similar to the one used by women to train men, but sadly it is not, since man turns it against himself. She praises him to get him to work for her, but he praises her to make her spend his money. If a man flatters and talks his neighbor's wife into buying new wall-to-wall carpeting for her living room, he must realize that this same neighbor will sell his own wife a bathtub the next day. How else could he pay for the carpeting? Man is caught in a trap of his own making. While outside, the struggle for money is becoming fiercer and fiercer. At home, his wife is growing more moronic, and from day to day, his house fills up with more junk and knickknacks, thereby financing the stultification of a husband's competitors' wives. Men who in fact prefer the plain and functional, every day find themselves more deeply entangled in the undergrowth of superfluous ornamentation and all kinds of embellishments. In their living rooms, the porcelain cats, bar stools, glass-top tables, candelabra, and silk cushions pile up. In their bedrooms, the walls are peppered with floral patterns. In their cabinets, a dozen different kinds of glasses are lined up. And if they look for a place to place their razors in the bathroom, all the shelves are filled with 1,000 creams and cosmetics of their artfully made-up wives. It is interesting that nearly the only products sold are those of benefit to women. Sports cars with which to entice her, luxury goods for women, or household appliances, Also for women, since the house actually belongs to her. Man is in fact a homeless creature, moving constantly between office and house. Women would be delighted to buy things for their husbands for whatever occasion, using the latter's money of course. They give ties, sport shirts, ashtrays, wallets as often as possible. The problem is that a man needs so very little. His clothing is standardized, hence inexpensive. His consumption of food and drink is restricted in case it affects his work capacity, and he has no time to consume other goods except cigarettes which he smokes at work. Industry has made every effort to get men interested in aftershave lotions, hairspray, or gaily colored leisure wear, but usually in vain. Only young men would take to the latest short-lived fashion. Their earning potential, however, is too low to interest women. Rich men, whom women quote-unquote love anyway, and artists who act as a kind of court jester to them, are allowed to sport the latest in clothes, and homosexuals maybe, but not the average man. Another example of this is Father's Day, which is still not very popular in spite of all the advertising, whereas Mother's Day is a bonanza for everyone concerned. The best thing men can do on their day of celebration is retire to a bar and have a few beers in peace. Apart from eating, drinking, and smoking, sex is the only activity where man is an independent consumer. He must be able to satisfy his urge. No wonder whole branches of industry are given over to this trade, taking advantage of this need to make him even more lustful and to persuade him to buy goods which merely serve to increase his desire. Satisfaction, of course, is another matter that has to be had from a woman at the customary price. As such, firms are usually run by men. In order to make a living, a man finds himself in the embarrassing position of having to make lectures of his fellow males. He caters to male desire for women in every conceivable way and proceeds, much like Alexander Pavlov and his dog, establishing conditioned reflexes. Pavlov made his dog's mouth water merely by ringing a bell which meant dinner. In this case, man encourages his fellow men to get an erection by producing photos of half-naked breast by means of a suggestive sigh in a popular song perhaps, or by writing a certain sentence in a book. That is why men will invent a whole range of methods of obtaining an erection, which another man will have to pay for. And of course, this mechanism doesn't bring returns only to manufacturers of erotica. All other industries take advantage of it too. Presents for women are sold to men by means of a picture of an attractive female bosom. A man will read a book or see a movie because he hopes it'll give him a kick. And as a secondary effect, he may suddenly feel the desire to go around the world with his woman, to buy a weekend cottage in the mountains, or to get a sports car. The American men's magazine Playboy provides us with one of the best proofs of men's methods of self-conditioning. Sandwiched between wonderful pairs of naked breasts are excellent articles of a highly theoretical nature to entertain him and to offer him respite between your. All of this is padded with offers of expensive cars, liquor, unnecessary clothing, and cigarettes. Women are highly offended by magazines like this, but men have lost all sense of the grotesque in this situation. The cult of the bosom has become something quite independent and depersonalized. The industry has told men so often and so successfully that women's breasts are there to attract him, that he has quite forgotten their real purpose. The diversion was entirely successful. As a result of the invention of substitute for mother's milk, he rarely has a chance to watch a baby feed at its mother's breast.
A critical man might well say that women have no self-respect. If they had, they would never admit the incredible extent of their ignorance as happily as they do. How easily man forgets that his own standards of honour, pride, and dignity are all instilled in him by women, and that the very masculinity of which he is so proud is but a sign of successful manipulation. No credit goes to him at all. Any psychology textbook will tell us that a child's ability to achieve something is best enhanced by giving that child self-confidence. This, however, is not something he can acquire by himself. He is born into a society on which he is dependent for everything, a society in which his own powers are insufficient to get what he wants, unaided. So, as a woman's first interest lies in creating an adult capable not only of providing for himself, but for others as well, it is of utmost importance to instill self-confidence in this youth. She starts by minimizing the dangers of life, insofar as she herself is aware of them. She closes his eyes to the possibility of death, or promises him eternal life as a reward for being good. Good, that is, by her standards. She tries as hard as she can to give him a sense of optimism that will best prepare him for her manipulation and for life in general. As we have already seen, praise is one of the best ways of inducing self-confidence and of enhancing productivity. There is another method which is as effective: self-abasement on the part of the woman. If a woman were not superior to her child, at least in the early stages of his development, the human race would cease to exist. A good mother will take the greatest care, however, never to let this fact impede her child's development. She does not want to turn the tables on herself and keep the boy tied to her apron strings for longer than necessary. As soon as possible, she will try to give a male child a sense of superiority toward herself, a kind of advance against achievements to come. This gives him his first experience of confidence. She may even go one step further and deliberately pretend to be less intelligent than she is, giving him a head start he will never lose. Women, of course, will never admit that in comparison to men they do nothing. They are constantly finding little tasks and keeping themselves busy. A woman simply tells her husband that her work is of no value compared with his. She implies that all the inane, pointless busy work she indulges in, such as ironing, baking, or beautifying the house, all those little jobs that take up her day, are necessary for the family's comfort. He is meant to think himself lucky to have a wife who will perform these menial tasks for his sake. And since men are completely unaware that women actually enjoy such jobs, they do think themselves lucky. Thanks to women, everything is labelled masculine or effeminate, worthy or unworthy. By imbuing all they do with sentimental and emotional values to such a degree that no one can remain unaffected by them, women have created for themselves a fool's paradise. Whatever they do is pointless compared with male achievements. And since they say so themselves, why should men quibble? Of course, if men really wanted to, they could destroy this tissue of lies and replace the terms masculine and effeminate with hard and easy. For most work done by men is hard, whereas housework is always easy. With the machine invented for this purpose by men, the work for a household of 4 persons is easily done in 2 hours each morning. Anything else a woman chooses to do with her time is superfluous, for her own amusement, and serves to maintain the idiotic status symbols of her clique: lace curtains, flower beds, brilliant polish. If this is called work, then it is nothing more than a shameless, expedient lie. Housework is so easy that in psychiatric clinics it is traditionally performed by those patients who have become so feeble-minded that they are no longer suited to other kinds of work. If women complain that they are not paid extra wages for this work, they demand very little about the wages of a motor mechanic. It is only a further proof of how attractive this work is to them. Furthermore, such demands are short-sighted, since they may one day lead to an actual evaluation of women as a workforce with commensurate wages. That would reveal to what extent they live at man's expense beyond their means. Still, man has been accustomed to female terminology since childhood, and he has no desire to undermine it. He needs the feeling of doing something great when he supports a woman. He needs to feel a woman could not do his work. Without this conviction, the monotony of his own life would drive him mad. He has only to feel for a second that a woman could do his job as well as he can, and he will doubt his own efforts at once. From time to time, as she sees fit, a woman might wish to create this impression, so that the customary distance between himself and the weaker sex is maintained, and his self-confidence restored. It is simple to analyse this vicious circle. Women invent rules, manipulate men to obey them, and so dominate the male sex. Of course, these rules in no way apply to women themselves. The male sense of honour, for example, is a system invented by women who loudly exempt themselves from it. They renounce the concept of honour and, as a result, manipulate men. In a recent television series, The Avengers, there was a scene in which two antagonists were facing each other across a billiard table, a pistol in front of each of them. It was agreed that to give them each an equal chance, they should count aloud up to 3 and then shoot. The hero, however, grabbed his pistol and fired at the count of 2, thus saving his own life. He chose to remain outside the system and was therefore in a position to manipulate the other, who, although in mortal danger, preferred to stick to a system approved by society rather than to use his own judgment. By making her own work appear degrading and contemptible, woman brings man to the point where he will undertake all the other tasks. In other words, everything she does not want to do. After all, she was there first as his mother, so she has first choice. A man loses his self-respect and feels useless if he has to do woman's work. In fact, many men are deliberately clumsy at housework, and women love them for it. Such clumsiness is so adorably masculine. If a man is capable of sewing on his own button and does so, he really is not a proper man at all. There must be something wrong with him if he pushes the vacuum cleaner around the house. Such beliefs enable man to place himself under the guardianship of women. He trusts himself to accomplish almost anything except to make a decent stew. And so he allows himself to be driven away from the most unexacting place of work in the world, without a murmur of complaint. Only after a certain amount of manipulation, when there is no longer any danger, will he be permitted to lend a hand in the house. Even then, woman always gives strict orders because he really does not understand about such things. He will always feel vaguely humiliated by a job of this nature, and therefore will never notice how much more agreeable it is than his own. To avoid having to exert effort, all a woman has to do is heave a sigh and indicate that she, as a woman, is simply not capable of the task. If she merely hints to a man, preferably with witnesses present, that he drives so much better than she does, she has found herself a chauffeur for life. Look at the motorways. They are full of women being driven by their husband chauffeurs. A woman will say that she cannot possibly, as a woman, go to a cafe or a theatre or a restaurant by herself. There is no rational explanation for this. Women are served equally well or badly, whether alone or accompanied by men. Present her with an opinion. So, armed with his conclusion as to what is best for his, hence also her, position in life, off she goes to register his choice. In that way, the election result is not in jeopardy. The alternative might mean the end of her personal well-being. Although she might not understand what politics are about, she is shrewd enough to realise this. One of the most fantastic flowers of this manipulation through self-abasement is the life of a well-to-do woman today, living comfortably in some pleasantly situated suburban villa, surrounded by children, dogs, other women, by every possible kind of labour-saving device, equipped with television sets and second cars. She will tell her husband, possibly a lawyer or engineer, what a lucky man he is, what a fulfilled life he leads, while she, as a woman, is constrained to lead a life unworthy of a human being. She says this to the man who has paid for all that trash with his life, and he believes her. In the Bible, it is said that Eve was created from Adam's rib. She is a copy, therefore a species of a lower order, yet another example of manipulation through self-abasement. Can anyone doubt that at some stage in history, this story was invented by a woman? She herself did not write it down, of course. A man did this for her, since her ability to write is a comparatively recent skill.
Constant self-abasement in the presence of men has led women to develop a secret language which other women understand, but which is incomprehensible to men since they take it literally. It would therefore be a great advantage to men to hold the key to this code and so create a sort of dictionary for themselves. Then, whenever they heard a standard phrase, they could decipher its real meaning. Here are a few examples with the translation into male language.
A man must be able to protect me.
A man must be able to spare me from all forms of discomfort. What else could he protect her from? Robbers? An atom bomb?
I need a man to make me feel secure.
Above all, he must keep his money worries to himself.
I must be able to look up to a man.
To be a possible candidate as a husband, he must be more intelligent, responsible, courageous, industrious, and stronger than I am. Otherwise, what purpose would he serve?
Of course I would give up my career if my husband asked me.
Once he is earning enough money, I am never going to work again.
The only thing I want in life is to make him happy.
I will do everything in my power to stop him from knowing how much I exploit him.
I will never bother him with trivial problems.
I'll do anything rather than keep him away from his work.
I am there for him alone.
No other man has to work for me.
In the future, I shall devote my life to my family.
I'm not going to lift another finger for the rest of my life. It's his turn now.
I don't believe in women's liberation. After all, we are living in an age of equality.
I am not such a fool. I'd rather let a man do the work for me.
I'm so bad at doing things like that.
That's a job he will have to do. What's he there for anyway?
He knows absolutely everything.
He even serves the function of an encyclopedia.
If a couple really love each other, there is no need to get married at once.
He is being a bit obstinate, but I'll soon get him around in bed.
I love him.
He is an excellent workhorse. Of course, women use stock phrases like these only when there is a man around to hear them. In the company of other women, they talk about their man quite normally, as they would speak of a domestic appliance, which everyone knows to be practical anyway. If a woman says, I've decided to give up wearing this coat or that hat because my boyfriend doesn't like it. She really means I might as well do him that favor. He's doing everything I want anyhow. When women are among themselves discussing the desirable qualities of a specific man, they will never declare that they want someone to look up to, someone who will protect them. Such twaddle would be greeted with the laughter it deserves. They are more likely to say they want a man with such and such a job. Jobs are synonymous with income level, old age pensions, widows' endowments, and the ability to pay high life insurance premiums. Or a woman might well say, the man I'm going to marry must be a little older than I, at least half a head taller and more intelligent, by which she means that it looks normal for a somewhat older, stronger, more intelligent human being to provide for a younger, weaker, more stupid creature. Don't come at me, I'm just reading what she wrote.
Woman has a great many methods to manipulate a man, but to list them all here is impossible. Suffice it to look more closely at two relatively harmless methods: a man's good manners and the suppression of his emotions. Any man who wishes to be a success with women, and is there one who doesn't, must acquire a variety of qualifications. Apart from intelligence, ambition, industry, and pertinacity, he must know exactly how to behave in the presence of women. With this aim in view, women have established certain norms which are called good manners. Basically, the rule is that any man who has a sense of self-respect must at all times treat a woman like a queen. Similarly, a self-respecting woman must at all times give man every opportunity of treating her like a queen. A woman will marry a man simply because he is wealthy. But if she is given the choice between two wealthy men, one with and one without manners, she will choose the man who has them. For if a man has mastered the rules governing good manners, a woman can be sure that he will never at any time question her ideal value as a woman, which he has long since been conditioned to respect, not even after she has ceased to attract him. Psychologists state that happiness comes with laughter, faith with prayer. This is true, but only for men. If he treats woman as a superior being, she will become a superior being for him. Women are more gifted to differentiate between fact and fiction. Unlike other methods of manipulation, good manners are not the result of conditioned forms of behavior based on profound psychological motivation. Children are taught to behave relatively late, and manners are particularly easy to recognize as a form of women's exploitation. It is a puzzle why even today such old tricks are still successful. The advice a mother gives to her teenage son going out on his first date is a good example of woman's audacity. Pay the taxi, get out first, open the door on the girl's side, and help her out. Offer her your arm going up the steps, or, if they are crowded, walk behind her in case she stumbles so that you can catch her. Open the door into the foyer for her, help her out of her coat, take the coat to the cloakroom attendant, get her a program, go in front of her when you are taking your seats and clear the way, offer her refreshments during the intermissions, and so on. And on top of that, we should not forget that the average type of play is an outdated form of entertainment because most of them are aimed at the intellectual level of women, as indeed are many of those things which we like to label cultured. Pity the poor man who has to submit to all this. He probably has an inkling that not only he, but the assembled company of directors, actors, and producers awaiting them are there only to form the background for woman and her clique. This background is simply a place where she can indulge in her inane orgies, where she and other women can take part in their grotesque masquerades, with the extras, the men, suitably costumed in black. The most cynical aspect of the good manners etiquette is the role of protector which is forced on a man. This begins harmlessly enough, it is true. He follows her when going upstairs or walks on the traffic side of a pavement. It is when we reach the level of military service and war that the significance of this becomes more serious. One of the most important rules is that a man must, under all circumstances, protect a woman from unpleasantness, even if necessary with his life. And as soon as he is old enough, he will do just that. This training is accomplished at such an early age that in any catastrophe, a man will save women and children before he thinks of himself, at the cost of his own life. There is no compelling reason why these roles should not be reversed. Since woman is unfeeling, she could cope with the psychological effects of war atrocities more easily than a man, and the modern form of war requires neither physical strength nor intelligence, only the ability to survive, tenacity. All statistics about lifespans show that women live longer than men and therefore are tougher. A normally developed North American woman who has taken sports at school, for example, is certainly not inferior in physical strength to the much smaller Vietnamese men. A G fighting against Asian men is making war on an enemy no stronger than his college girlfriends.
We have already mentioned women's lack of emotional capacity. The fact that women make every attempt to suppress men's ability to express his emotions is a certain indication of this. Yet she still contrives to create the myth of feminine depth of feeling and vulnerability. The tear ducts are tiny pouches containing fluid. With training, they can be controlled, just as one controls the bladder, so that there is no more need for an adult to cry than there is for him to wet his bed. A male child is taught very early in life to control both these functions. Once again, woman degrades herself. Boys don't cry, you're not a little girl. Little girls, on the other hand, are never taught to control their tears, and they quickly learn to use them to advantage. If a man sees a woman crying, it would never occur to him that she may be incontinent. He assumes her feelings are aroused to a considerable extent, and even judges the degree of feeling by the quantity of liquid shed. This is obviously a mistaken interpretation. Women really are callous creatures, mainly because it is to their disadvantage to feel deeply. Feelings might seduce them into choosing a man who is of no use to them, i.e., a man whom they could not manipulate at will. They might even actively come to dislike men. After all, men are beings who should be alien to them, and decide to spend their lives exclusively in the company of women. In fact, however, there are far fewer overtly homosexual women than homosexual men, and such women are generally well-to-do or at least financially secure. A woman with feelings would have to think and work, to take on responsibilities, and to learn to do without all the things which mean so much to her. Because she does not want this, she decides to remain callous. But she knows at the same time that it is necessary for woman to enact the role of a sensitive being, or man would become aware of her essentially cold, calculating nature. Still, as her emotions are always faked and never felt, she can keep a clear head. You can take advantage of someone's feelings only if you are not involved yourself. Therefore, she turns a partner's emotions to her own profit, only taking care to make sure he believes she feels as deeply as he himself, perhaps even more deeply. She must make him believe she, as a woman, is much less stable, much more irrational, much more emotional. Only thus may her deception remain undetected, but manipulation has, in any case, already taken care of that. A real man does not weep or laugh very loud. Reserved smiles have a sympathetic effect on those around him and make him seem a serious person to his business associates. He never shows surprise. He never screams, "Ah!" when a light goes on, nor "Oh!" when he touches cold water. He never shows that he is making an effort by saying "Uff" when he is lifting a heavy case. He does not even sing when he is happy. Therefore, if a man notices all these emotional reactions in a woman, it never occurs to him that he has been conditioned by a woman not to express his own similar feelings. As a result, he assumes she is much more sensitive than he is, for otherwise she would not dare to exhibit her feelings in such an uncontrolled manner. A man who would cry only if a real catastrophe happened, perhaps the death of his wife, must assume that when his wife breaks into floods of tears because of cancelled holiday plans, for example, her emotions are equally strong, but for a lesser cause. He even thinks himself loutish and callous because he cannot share her grief. What an advantage a man would have if only he realized the cold, clear thoughts running through a woman's head while her eyes are brimming with tears.